A few 5-speed Triumph gearbox parts. Well, we have, and I don't know, many people know, but from 72.5 to the end of 74, the first type of Triumph gearbox, which is very much like a quaif, right. This is the layshaft set for an early one. First thing you notice on an early set is this wide gear here and narrow gear on the end. This narrow gear here, which is top gear on a 5-speed lay, will mate with that, the high gear output shaft where your sprocket's carried. You can see that they're about the same thickness, right? On the later model, in other words your left hand shift and later, when that came out, you can see that the gear is quite a bit wider, and even though it's chamfered slightly at this point, the root of the gear, the width of the base of the gear is a lot wider. It's maybe 20 or 30% wider, and that is what gives that gear more strength. And you can also then see that this gear next to it, this one's a bit damaged anyway, but it's a lot narrower. That is about the only gear. If you had a blown lay shaft, or this, usually one of these will break, it's not unusual to see a tooth missing, then you can replace, if you can find a wide gear here and grind the original gear, that wide gear down to that, then you can pretty well run the lay shaft set again. The trouble with it is, when you buy a new lay shaft with this wide gear on it, it pretty well comes with that one beside it. And that's not a problem either, but once you get to that point, you might as well go to a later lay shaft set. And the thing about it is, the Triumph high gear set, and this one's missing third, because third gear can be a bit of a pain. They tend to be the weaker gear in the whole thing anyway. But the 5-speed gearbox is actually quite a strong box. And generally speaking, this is the problem, but the problem is here is on the lay shaft, is that. The other problem with lay shafts on the early to late is, if you look at the first gear cross dog, or whatever you want to call it, you can see that the early one is way narrow at the point or the base of the tooth or the cog compared to this. This is the upgraded later one, and it's then mates with its first gear. This one mates with its first gear. They're not interchangeable. Nothing on the lay shaft is interchangeable from the late series, from 76 through to 83, to the early stuff like this one from 72.5 to the end of 74. I say the end of 74 because that's pretty well about the end of these early ones, and they stopped making the bikes for a little while and then come back in 76 with the US regulation left-hand shift and the stronger gearbox. The damage that was caused on these early boxes was mainly caused in twins. You know, the clutch pack would stick, and so old mate would just jam it into first gear, and more often than not tear a tooth off here. That was how the disaster happened on all these early gearboxes. When they went to that wider tooth and the stronger dog, that was the end of that problem. None of these gears are interchangeable. You can see, you might be able to see, there's a shallow recess in that gear, but a deep recess in this gear, a deeper recess. And that means that in the back of the first gear, they're different as well. And so our first gear selector fork. This then has the engagement slots there for the dogs on from third to second. Again, that is different. Those engagement dogs on the later model one won't fit in that. They're different. It's wider. You can see, well, maybe you can see, but there's a difference. It won't go in. That won't go in there. But it drops in there. So that's how, and then, like I say, the only one that's even half pipe practical is the 4th gear. It's just a bit too long. Would need to be ground back if you wanted to fit a wide tooth on the back here. The 5-speed, the main shaft, well, you know, there's early, there's late, there's Harris. Harris came out with the big thread, the larger thread, less chance of snapping that shaft off, which I've seen happen. But more importantly, at the back end of the shaft, on all the early 5s, that can snap off at that end if you tighten it up too much on your kickstart pull. So you just, you know, buff it up and use the lock washer. The early gear and late gear and the high gear, which is the one that runs on the shaft. There's no bearings in this one. It's a new one, and that's a new high gear bearing. Well, that goes on there no problem. The new bearing and the early high gear that would have come with all those layshaft gears over there. Not particularly any good to you buying a new bearing and trying to fit it to an older set. So even if you did upgrade your layshaft, you've probably got to upgrade your top gear as well to fit the new bearing or the new style bearing, or depending on what you pick up, bits and pieces if you're trying to build one up. Nowadays, Harris makes all this stuff, LF Harris, but it's sold through all the dealers. And generally speaking, you'll find them somewhere between 14 and 1500 Australian for a full set of 5-speed, which includes your cam plate and your dogs. Now, I haven't shown the cam plate. There's 2 different cam plates. One was typically in a twin, one was typically in a triple. Now with the triples you don't see, well, the triple is not a hollow shaft because it has a different sort of a clutch pull mechanism, and there's a lot less chance with the smoother power output of a triple, and the fact that the clutch is never stuck, there's not much chance of a smashed gearbox out of a triple. In fact, this parts of these is out of a triple. That lay shaft sets out of a triple, and this main shaft sets out of a triple. Well, sorry, not the main shaft, but the other gears. So it's not unusual for a twin, and especially with the original factory plates, for those to smash a gearbox if you don't break the clutch with the pull the lever in and kick through and break the clutch or separate the plates. The early plates can stick solid. Seen many of them. Fixed one the other day. Had to pull the clutch out. It came out as a complete pack. Smash it on the ground, break it apart, clean the plates up, buff them down, and put it back together. The best fix though is to put a set of MGO Wassel Taiwanese plates in there. The big problem is the older plates, they don't go or mix too well with this modern oil, or any modern oil, not so much modern oil, but the engine oil so much. And in the T140s, or from 1970 on, when the primary chain and the primary area was the same oil as your engine, if you're using modern oils, which is pretty well a no-no anyway, there's not enough zinc in them, the oils, I don't know, they just don't work too well with the original old plates, and they'll tend to stick. If you go with like, I use a Penrite 4070 or any oil that's got a full zinc and made for older engines, a diesel oil is usually all right. There's not many cleansers and additives in the oil compared to modern oils. And with those, a set of cheapy Taiwan plates, I've never had a problem with them sticking. And of course, if you've got the early model separate oil bath 4-speed stuff, you just put a bit of 20-weight oil in there. It's separate from your engine oil anyway. A bit of 20-weight ATF or something, you know, automatic trans. And that works pretty good. Automatic trans is all about clutches in the auto, and they don't seem to have a problem. But anyway, so the big problem with a 5-speed is if you've got an early one, treat it nicely. It's all right. I have a 74 that I've got 45,000 odd miles on it, and it'll lift the front wheel across the intersection just slightly off the ground, carry it, but I've got 21 tooth gearbox sprocket on it, so that's 4,000 at 70 mile an hour. It hasn't hurt that gearbox yet, hopefully it won't. The other ones, well, the stuck clutch on the bike I was riding the other day, get a push off start on it, hold the clutch in, trying to give it a zap on the throttle to get it to brake, and about all it was doing was pulling the front wheel up off the ground. So, and that's with the standard 20 tooth on a 750, and it would lift the wheel just on a roll on and whack the throttle. But it still wouldn't brake the clutch, which sometimes is all you need to do. Just to get a roll on in gear, snap it into gear with your clutch in when you're rolling, not when you're stopped. If you do that when you stop, you're likely to smash the gearbox. But if you do it when you're rolling, it'll engage, it'll go, you keep your clutch in, you keep zapping the throttle, quite often they'll brake, separate. So anyway, with the 5-speed, the biggest problem with the early model is this small, or this narrow gear on the layshaft, and that poor dog on the first gear. They're the problems. They were the original problems. But when they redesigned the whole layshaft set, including changing that, they all got changed in small manners, in a small amount. Be it that, or that, or that. Everything on that layshaft set there got changed. So, except the shaft itself. So, like I say, if you're looking at a second-hand gearbox, and it's one of these early ones, if it all seems to be in good nick, then just be careful how you use it. But I mean, they're good for many miles. In a Trident, like I say, the power pulses, the power delivery is not really a problem. If you're going to start pulling wheelies on it, well, nowadays that's not the right thing to do on these old things anyway. But generally speaking, a 5-speed is a slick gearbox. Anything that I've got, I mean, they're slicker than most of the modern. You listen to some of the modern gearboxes, how they clunk and carry on between changes. These things are so slick. And when you compare them to a 4-speed gearbox, what you're doing here is all you're doing is 2 and 3. There's a 4-dog there and a 3-dog here. So all you're doing is engaging a couple of dogs. With a 4-speed, you're engaging anywhere from 20 to 30 odd teeth and trying to engage them all. That's why 4-speeds will, if your clutch is a tad sticky, it'll want to grind going in because it's trying to engage 30 teeth, together in one go. Whereas here, all you're doing on going into first gear here is engaging a 4-dog sprocket. So look, 5-speeds are a lovely thing, but you just got to be careful if you got an early one, and you might need to, if you pick up an early one or you got an early bike and everything's fine, great, just treat it right and be careful of your clutch braking, clutch separation. So anyway, hopefully some of that'll help you if you're interested at all in 5-speeds. But generally speaking, I mean, I've seen them in drag bikes doing quite well, but all with this later model stuff. So just that's what you've got to be on the lookout for if you're looking to buy a 5-speed second hand. Just make sure there's nothing breaking on the lay shaft, because it might be a little bit hard to find. So anyway, thanks for watching.